no sense of purpose or direction. The great river of directionality has turned into this big lazy lake, and all we're doing is lying on our air mattresses, bored by our own relativism.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. You have to see this. In this clip, Bishop Barron drops a simple but stunning explanation for why the church still matters in our modern world. And watch what happens. He's talking to Russell Brand, and if you guys know who Russell Brand is, you know he is a guy that can talk circles around just about anyone. Yet when Bishop Barron is speaking, he is speechless. Seriously, look at Brand's eyes as Bishop Barron unpacks this truth that he's about to unpack. It says it all. So tell me what you think of Bishop Barron's response in the comments below, and I will have my reaction on the back end. Let's go.
Do you feel that the part of what rationalism has inhered is a sense through relativism that everything is kind of tepid and difficult to understand, that there are no moral absolutes, there is nothing upon which we can hold with certainty, there is nowhere where you can throw yourself and receive grace? And do you feel that that is somehow deliberate? And if indeed there are dark powers in the principality, how would that not be one of the results?
Yes. Let me put it in terms of the ultimate question of God's existence. From Feuerbach on through Freud and many others, they always throw the charge at religious people that, well, it's just wishful thinking. It's, what you want it to be true. And so you invent God and so on. They never turn it though back on themselves, that there can be a lot of wishful thinking involved in an atheist, because to say, oh, there's no God, there's no absolute norm. There's no absolute norm for epistemic, aesthetic, or moral values. Well, then I can live any old way I want. Well, that's enormously attractive to a compromised and fallen soul. If the world of objective value turns you upside down, it claims you and it sends you and it redefines you, there's part of that process that it's exhilarating if you surrender to it, but it's overwhelming if hey, I don't want that. That's making way too much of a demand on me. So I'm going to pretend all of that stuff is just private opinion, culturally conditioned. There's nothing objective to it. It makes my life a lot easier and duller. And I think that's, we're looking at a lot of young people, the boredom among young people. That's what a purely materialistic and relativistic worldview will generate. I see. To me, religion, Russell, is an invitation to adventure. And I know, look, I'm wearing this drab black suit and all that, and there's different reasons why we do that. But in the common imagination, there's an association of religion with these poor nerdy people that they're living at this very low level. On the contrary, religion is meant to open you to adventure. It's materialism and relativism that is the door to banality and tepidity. What makes life fun and adventurous. Saint Irenaeus, whose feast day we had a couple days ago, the glory of God as a human being fully alive. That's the game. That's what we want, is to have people fully alive. That happens through a surrender to objective value. And see, thank God that the church, despite we're getting attacked all the time, and I get it for all the different reasons, but that there's some voice in the culture that's calling for objective value. Because if we surrender just this great sea of relativism, we're like a lot of people on, air mattresses floating around, no relation to each other, but no energy, no sense of purpose or direction. The great river of directionality has turned into this big lazy lake, and all we're doing is lying on our air mattresses, bored by our own relativism. So the church it's against St. Paul again. It's this grab you by the shoulders quality, like wake up, look, open your eyes. That's, Chesterton had that observation about, you look at Christian statuary, like on Chartres Cathedral. He said the saints don't have their eyes closed. They've got them kind of wildly open, big open eyes, because they're looking out at this extraordinary world of value. That's how I read the church and its role in the culture.
So I just have a simple reflection that one little illustration that Bishop Barron gave towards the end of the river of directionality and the lazy lake and the air mattresses, et cetera. I just found that so interesting. And he's basically explaining that our modern culture and relativism are like this lazy lake. And I began to think, have you ever been to a lazy lake? Have you ever been to a pond that has no movement in it? And just like all of the moss and there's fish floating and the smell is putrid. It's dead. And what's so interesting is that our culture sees Christianity as this benign, irrelevant, mundane lazy lake, it's dead basically. Yet on the contrary, what we see is that relativism, if you actually live into it, is a lot like this lazy lake, as Bishop Barron is explaining. So a non-religious life actually is the boring life. Why? Because in relativism, you have no purpose, you have no direction, you have no flow of directionality. Yet in the Christian faith, because it is an objective worldview, you live into a purpose, an identity, a calling that transcends yourself, in a God that transcends you, right? So you're being called, you're being summoned to something that is greater than yourself. So you're out of yourself and into God. And that actually is an adventure. Just read the scriptures, look at the great heroes and saints of the faith like Abraham as one example. It's amazing how the sales pitch of our culture that is relativistic is that you will have purpose, but really all you have is your own sense of created identity. It says you will have direction, but you don't really have any direction that you're being pointed to. You have no North Star that you're being pointed to. So it is, in fact, that lazy lake, even though it claims that Christianity is that. It was a fascinating insight. This is the Daily Dose of Christ, so I want to reflect on how this might connect to Jesus. And I think it connects to Jesus in this way. And you probably have different ways it could connect to Jesus. But I think it's so important to see like the Christian faith is not an individual lived experience, right? It's not like a modern individualistic, expressive individualism that's relativistic and you get to create your own identity. No, that's not what Christianity is. Christianity is a calling to follow God and be united to other brothers and sisters in the faith that puts you in community and gives you a direction and a shared purpose with those other brothers and sisters in Christ. In other words, it's a movement. It's like a river going somewhere with a purpose. It has directionality to it. And it reminded me of the story in the Gospels where Jesus goes and finds a lame, crippled man. Remember, by that lake, by that pond that the waters would stir sometimes, and there's all of these sick, poor people. Not, yeah, they were probably poor because, yeah, that's just kind of the connotation, but they were sick and they were lame. And so they were outsiders, outcast by this pool. And they would try to get up from their mat and they would try to go into the water so that they could be healed. Jesus comes up to one lame man and says, "Why are you sitting here? What are you doing here? Why are you by this dead, lazy lake on your mat, your air mattress?" And what does Jesus say? Jesus says, get up, walk, and go. Go home. In other words, go somewhere, move. You have a new purpose. You have a new life. You have been healed. And I think it's so important. Like, that's a perfect picture for what the Christian life is all about. Without Jesus, life becomes a lazy lake where every once in a while you might run to Jesus or you might run for your own personal benefit and purposes, or you might use the church for your own purposes to make you feel good. And you've completely missed the point. And it probably would be a lazy lake in that um, way of thinking. But with a true life with Jesus that really has been called and summoned to this transcendental north that is to live into the purposes that God has for you, it gives you a complete direction. It gives you a purpose. It gives you a reason for living other than the reasons you create in your own head and for your own purposes and your own self. And that is significant because Jesus is saying, and this historical story of him healing this lame person, and we are all the lame person in the story as well, shows that God can give us a new direction and can actually get us out of that lazy lake into adventure. That was just an amazing little connection that I thought that imagery that Bishop Barron was using was so fascinating, and I hope it was a help to you today. All right, that's all I have for this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe. See you in the next one. Peace.